not be enough food.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. The nation has a new civil rights law tonight, but it has not been a good day for the man who signed it. Instead of being able to claim credit for a major piece of legislation that guarantees new rights for women and minorities, President Bush has been on the defensive. At the very least, his administration is being accused of political bungling. Others see a darker motive, accusing Mr. Bush of signing new civil rights protections into law with one hand while trying to take them away with the other. At the White House tonight, ABC's Britt Hume.
At a Rose Garden ceremony this afternoon, the president was at pains to say he is committed to the legislation he was about to sign.
This is a very good bill. Let me repeat, this is a very good bill.
Mr. Bush insisted the measure had safeguards to prevent hiring by racial quota, the issue that had caused him to veto an earlier bill. But he also found it necessary to say this.
I support affirmative action. Nothing in this bill overturns the government's affirmative action programs.
That, however, was not the apparent message of a written presidential statement drafted to accompany today's signing. That proposed statement, circulated inside the administration late yesterday, ordered that long-standing minority hiring guidelines, quote, be terminated. After an overnight storm of protest, that language was removed. But the storm continued today among Democrats on Capitol Hill.
Mr. Bush, Mr. President, you ought to be ashamed.
David Duke has lost the election in Louisiana, but his message has won the hearts and minds of the White House.
With the economy failing and white voters deserting him, the president was prepared to appeal to people's fears.
Sources said the president did not see the statement ahead of time. White House counsel Gray, assigned by Mr. Bush to resist quotas, circulated the proposed statement in strong language reflecting his restrictive view of the bill. What Gray didn't count on, apparently, was that it would leak out to the newspapers before it could be reviewed, triggering a public uproar. This outcome is not what anyone here had in mind. The civil rights bill might have pleased blacks, but the fuss over counsel Gray's restrictive language seems to have rekindled their doubts about the president. Gray's tough approach might have pleased Mr. Bush's conservative critics, but the dropping of that language has reinforced their doubts about the president. So Mr. Bush seems to have gotten a civil rights bill he could sign, but has ended up pleasing almost no one in the process. Britt Hume, ABC News, the White House.
The potential effect in the workplace of all this toing and froing about affirmative action guidelines is no less confusing than what went on at the White House last night. The guidelines date all the way back to 1965, and they cover more than 40 million workers. While Mr. Bush said today they will remain in place, all the talk of a directive phasing them out made workers and employers all across the country anxious today. Here's ABC's John Martin.
All over the country today, Hispanic and black workers are holding construction jobs because of federal orders that require aggressive recruiting of minorities and women in the workplace. But the prospective order created some apprehension.
It would send the wrong message, especially to those contractors who are currently trying to make every effort to try to include minorities and women in the workplace.
Civil rights laws passed by Congress and a series of guidelines from presidents all the way back to Lyndon Johnson encourage government agencies and private firms with government contracts to hire minority workers.
And to, in effect, abolish it all by the stroke of a pen would not only restate government policy, but would also leave a 2+ decade history of experience floundering.
That was the argument made by business executives and members of the federal bureaucracy to deal with minority issues. Many of them were astonished by the overnight news reports of the proposed order.
I was startled. I was surprised. But then the more I read, the more absurd it got as far as George Bush. And I just felt that he would not issue such an order.
Others, like former Democratic Congressman Parren Mitchell, worried that just the discussion sent a mixed message.
So what is the net result of what took place today?
Confusion. Absolute confusion. Did he mean it? Didn't he mean it? What was his objective?
The president insisted his objective was to support affirmative action. But the net effect of the last 24 hours has been to raise doubts in the workplace. John Martin, ABC News, Washington.
On Capitol Hill today, a log jam has been broken that may clear the way for Congress to pass an anti-crime.